When revenue is down, it can make you panic. If the clients aren't coming in at the same rate that they had been, when something that works stops working or doesn't work as well, you can think that you're doing something wrong. And I question if maybe it's nothing that you're doing, it's just the nature of business. So it's time for monthly money talks with Jen, and I want to pick her brain around whether or not businesses cycle much the way markets in the stock market cycles and real estate cycles. I'm really curious to know, do businesses also seem to have a cycle? So we're going to dive in. Hey, you leader, entrepreneur, business owner, solopreneur, whatever you call yourself, we know you're a visionary business builder, wealth seeker looking to combine a passion for doing good with leading consciously. It's time to shift from a traditional focus of pure wealth accumulation to one that integrates well-being and fulfillment. You're here for a purpose, and it's time to shine your light. So here we go. Welcome back to the Conscious Edge podcast. I'm your host, Alecia St. Germain, founder of the Conscious Edge, where I help women entrepreneurs live a more joyful life, get back the time that they maybe have been putting into their business and not finding the balance. It's really about expanding our capacity so that business becomes easy to hold while you're living your life and making it sustainable. So, welcome back, Jen. I'm so excited that you're here.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today because sometimes I think that when we're thinking about financials and bookkeeping and money talks, that we stick to like the strategy of it. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about something I've noticed entrepreneurs experiencing and the mindset that they have sometimes around it, where they panic.
Yeah.
Like when they see that the money's not coming in the way it was, what's working before isn't working as well now. So I wanted to pick your brain a little bit around that. Before I get into it, if you are new here, these monthly money talks with Jen. Jen is my financial strategist. She takes care of my bookkeeping. And I meet with her near monthly to discuss goals in the business, how things are going. And she helps me make decisions about what my next moves are going to be. So she's my right-hand gal. I cannot tell you, Jen, how much peace of mind you bring to my business and my life.
That's awesome. I love that. I just genuinely love helping people. Like that's what I've realized is so important to me. So I love hearing that.
And Jen also, she leads our financial leadership lab inside of the Exponential Entrepreneur. So women come together every single month and she teaches them different aspects of being the CEO of their business and what that means from a financial standpoint, and has them taking action on getting a lot more comfortable with making data-driven decisions in their business. And I think what's really cool about that space is it gives women who, maybe aren't as comfortable with the numbers, but even those that have been keeping budgets and know how to do that stuff, they've been making decisions in silo.
Mm-hmm.
And so they get to come together with other business owners. We look at their numbers, look at their financials, send them back to their bookkeepers to make adjustments. And then we're going to be getting into, as the year goes on, maybe even some decisions around what's going to drive their business. And they get to do it with some thinking partners.
Yeah, which is so important because so many business owners feel like they're alone and they don't have people to discuss and go through that process with another person. So it's really powerful when somebody doesn't feel like they have to do all of that all by themselves.
And I feel like you do such a good job to make it simple and no shame.
Yeah, that's so important. Yes.
So like someone who is like, I don't really do anything. It's uncomfortable. Just me showing up to these calls is me taking a step in the right direction and then finding out that like they'll go in and they actually started looking at their numbers and figured out that something was categorized. I remember that for myself. Like the first time I was like, Jen, I think I found some mistakes, and it built my confidence that I can figure out numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember like the first time you emailed about that. It was so fun because I was like, oh, she's looking at this and she's noticing it and she's like understanding and then able to like execute some things. It's so cool to see that autonomy and the confidence grow.
And so neat when we decided to do this lab to see that same thing evolving.
Yeah.
Right. In someone else. So like do it once. Okay. Maybe it's a glitch. Like maybe it's just a thing, but see it replicated in other people is so cool. And everybody's taken something different away. What in the lab for you has been, I don't know, maybe an unexpected joy or something you didn't anticipate that you're really glad?
That's a good question. I think actually like the people who this process is so uncomfortable that showing up to the calls is that step. I think that's pretty amazing that they're willing to put aside that, like, this is all so foreign or is so uncomfortable, that they're willing to trust us in that space and still show up, despite the fact it would be so much easier to just not show up, not get uncomfortable, maybe watch the replay. So, I mean, I think that's pretty neat that we have some people that this really is their first step into this financial space and it really isn't comfortable for them. And then to have that level of trust that they're willing to still come in there and experience it and get uncomfortable with us is pretty cool.
And I love the gamut of people too. Like someone who has multiple businesses, has been around in business for a lot of years, but is starting a new, like kind of part of her business and just saying, you know what, I want to do it differently from the beginning this time.
Yeah, which is awesome.
And then people who have started to reach some goals, but they're wanting to now maybe pay themselves more and drive business in a different way. Just think everybody is on that goal to not be so reactive around money.
Yes. And that's huge because most of us are. Most of us react instead of being in a place where we can respond. And I think that's a huge difference that this work really underscores, is the ability to not just be in that space where you're making these knee-jerk reactions, but you're able to really think for a second, process information, and then be able to make a response. And that's really critical in business.
I wanted to share with you actually a really quick win from our budget So when I work with Jen, one of the things that we do is we set up a financial plan for the year. Another word for budget, but like I think of it as, because I'm about capacity, financial capacity plan. Like, how do I grow my capacity or hold the same capacity financially for my business? And so we create this plan and we go through what do we think is going to happen this year? And revenue wise, what expenses are we anticipating? And one of the things I mentioned to you was I think my computer is not going to make it much longer. Like, I feel like I'm on borrowed time. I hate changing technology. I will keep my phone probably far longer. I will keep my computer far longer than I should. And so what happens is then I get into a situation where it really doesn't work and I have to buy it reactively.
And it's a whole stressful thing, right? You're like pushed into it and you got to make the decision and you probably can't hit the sale and you got to just get it done.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I said, I think I'm on borrowed time. I need to plan for a new computer. Well, so we intentionally planned that revenue was going to be lower in January, February, and March because it's a time when kids get sick, people get sick. And I've talked about this in other episodes, how we have this like societal expectation that January 1 hits and we're supposed to all feel like we want to go like hit our goals massively. And I cannot tell you the number of people that have kind of apologized like, they don't apologize, but they just say, I just haven't been feeling it the beginning of the year. I just haven't. And I hear it over and over and over and over again. And I was like, if that's not a sign, that is not the time.
Then what is?
So my point is, we planned for revenue to be lower. And in part of that plan, at the end of last year, we said, okay, what do we do to get more cash in the door on hand to make sure that I don't end up in a reactive phase?
Right.
Where it's like, money's too tight. I have to go sell something. I have to get into this kind of icky energy.
Yeah.
So we planned for that. And lo and behold, my computer now, when I shut it down, it makes like this noise right as it's shutting down. I was like, it never did that before. I think it's not feeling well.
Oh, no.
But I would have in the past maybe continued to put it off, felt uncomfortable, like, oh gosh, can I afford this? I'm going to have to put this on credit card. I'm going to have to do what XYZ. But we already talked about what was the runway in the business? What is the projection? How much is needed this year to create this to happen? And included in that was money to buy a computer.
Absolutely.
So now I have to make this decision on buying a computer, but it changes nothing. We've already processed all the feelings about it. We already know what impact that has to the bottom line. And so it's just like not even a thing.
Yeah. And even a step further, like it's in the plan for the year. But to your point, you're also in like your slow time of year. But because of the other steps that we've taken previously to have all of that planning, you're in a position where you can go buy the computer and you don't have to necessarily use debt if you don't want to, right? So again, that whole layer of like, it's like step leads to step. It just compounds on each other, where not only is it just in the budget, we know it's there, but you're also prepared cash flow wise to take care of it and not to have to be forced into a debt situation in order to make a good decision.
Yeah. So testament to the kind of work, all of this.
So cool.
It's just, I really want to land with listeners that this work is everything to your peace of mind. And so many people are searching for strategy and more revenue. And if you just slow down enough to plan and know your numbers really well and make these kinds of decisions not in silo, because what happens is when you make decisions in silo, even if you think you understand how to put a budget together, your budget is put together with your thought errors, with your mindset.
Yeah.
And so having someone like you, Jenn, to just ask the really good questions that are going to help reveal where you might not be thinking clearly or you're thinking in a stuck way is everything. So,
yeah. Well, I think like you said, people, they're seeking the peace, but it's interesting how many people avoid this kind of work and then they stay stuck in that cycle, right? Like they can't find the peace and they're grasping at all of these other things. I really think even if the truth is not pretty, there is something to be said for just settling in and actually looking at everything and understanding what the reality is. I see that bring peace far more than like I can't look, I just can't deal with it. But most people are in that phase where they don't want to really know. They know it's not great and they don't really want to see what it looks like. But I think that actually brings a lack of peace. Whereas like knowing what it is and becoming more educated on it, becoming like in the driver's seat and realizing you can actually change things, I think that's what ends up bringing people peace.
125,000%. Let me just say that. So if you're new, I was about to say, and then I went on a tangent. We do these monthly money talks with Jen, and we put them out every single month. We put this podcast out every single Tuesday. So sometimes I have Mindfulness Matters with Jonathan Duggar, where we talk a lot about presence and mindfulness. Sometimes there's a guest that comes on. So if you don't want to miss an episode, make sure you hit the follow or subscribe button from wherever you're listening. And then if what we're talking about, you're like, I think I need that, you can come into the Financial Leadership Lab and work with Jenn in our group. So if you want to do that, the first next step or the best next step is to book a capacity call with me. We'll go through and we'll assess your capacity in multiple different areas, not just the financial area. And then I can talk to you about how you can get access to that room with Jenn. So you would do that at consciousedge.com/capacity. And we would love to have you. We would love to help you transform that. I will say this is not for new business owners. This is for people who have established their business and they really want to get better at the financial aspect of their business. Okay, so kind of on this note, like same topic, but just diving in a little bit deeper. I was sitting at coffee the other day with a friend of mine who every time there aren't new leads coming in the door, there's a panic that ensues. And I don't necessarily get that same panic. And I really wondered because I'm so used to the real estate world cycling, the real estate market cycling. I've been around real estate from middle school, high school, starting when I was 18, doing my first real estate deal. So I've been through some market cycles. Mm-hmm. And so as I'm even watching real estate investors who started in the mid 2015, 14, they're all panicking right now because they've never been through a market cycle. And so I'm just so used to business being up and down and you have to pivot and use different strategies at different times that it does not make me uncomfortable. And so I was curious because I asked her, I was like, well, businesses cycle. She goes, well, I've never had that. So I asked you, I was like, do businesses have cycles? Mm-hmm. In your experience, do they?
Yeah, I do. I think we all have this picture that business is just like this straight up arrow, right? Like you just start your business and then it just goes and it's super easy and it's always going like at this upward trajectory. And I think the reality is that most business journeys is this combination of like ups and downs and side steps and back steps. And there are maybe a cycle, not as much as like in the real estate context of like, we do kind of see some like patterns and cycles that are a little more predictable or a little more familiar. But I do think all business tends to have a natural up and down. I think like the one consistent thing is that everything does tend to change, right? Mm-hmm. And yet I think a lot of business owners, I think they're chasing like stability. And so they can find that change or that shift or the things that were working and that now they're not working. They can find that really destabilizing and really struggle with that. So I think that's a common reaction when things are changing is for people to get concerned with it.
So thus the name of your company.
Yes.
To Peak Solutions, right?
Yes, which, I mean, I do live by the mountains and I love the mountains, but that's really the concept behind it is that business ownership. I always say that it's from the peaks and then through the valleys and then to the peaks. Like there is this up and down. And oftentimes you can be on the top of the mountain and then the next minute you're like falling down and rolling down uncontrollably. And it just really changes really quickly. So.
Okay. So we've established yes, businesses have ups and downs. I think the reframe is instead of us saying something is going wrong, maybe it's something is changing.
Yeah, I think that can be a helpful way. I think looking at what's changing and is it something that's in our control or not in our control can be really helpful.
So what kinds of things are not in control?
There can be a lot of market shifts. So we can look at economic conditions that are not in our control. Political decisions really influence the market. Like right now, we're seeing obviously gas prices are increasing. So that's something if you're in a business where you need to buy fuel, large amounts of fuel for your business, that's going to directly impact your profitability as your fuel costs go up. Or if you're a consumer or business that's buying goods that have had price increases accordingly, right? So there's this ripple effect from things that are not necessarily in our control. And that can be really challenging because we feel like, oh my gosh, well, I can't do anything about this. How am I supposed to get through it? So
that's interesting. So on my side of things, right? You know, my books and I lost the term, Jen.
Your financials?
No, like my cost of goods compared to my profitability.
Yeah, profitability there.
Right? Is pretty high.
Yeah.
And so market conditions being things where what it costs to run your business changes. And so in my mind, I always think of like, oh, okay, my end user, my client might not have as much expendable income because their money's going elsewhere. Right. So people will have different psychology, different buying mindsets during different things that happen in the world.
Absolutely. And that can even shift within a year. I mean, like last year, I was seeing a lot of price sensitivity and kind of contraction in certain industries that my clients are in where they weren't getting the yeses, budgets were low for projects and things. And then Q1 all of a sudden shifted and was really expansive. So it is very interesting to see how from like that end user perspective, that can be pretty volatile in any given time frame. And that's, again, not something that you as the business owner can necessarily control
or predict. Yeah. Even thinking like if you work with corporate clients, sometimes they have budget spend that they have to spend down. So they're like super excited to spend in Q4.
Yep.
Or they've already spent it all. And so they can't say yes until Q1. Right. Yeah. So those are just things that you cannot control as some of those pieces. What can you control?
That's a great question because I think a lot of times people focus on the fact that they can't control anything, and that's kind of their perception or their narrative, that they're just at the mercy of everything. But I think what's really important to acknowledge is you can control how you respond, and you can control how you adapt, and you can control how you're operating your business. And one of the things that I frequently see cause a big issue when people are trying to navigate these things and they're not being adaptable. So they're too rigid and saying, well, it has to work this way, or it's always worked this way, or this is how we do it, and not being willing and sometimes to make some really hard decisions, like decisions that none of us want to have to make. But if the market's contracting and we have to cut costs and we've done all the things that we can do, like sometimes that might be cutting people, or sometimes that might be cutting things that are really things that we really enjoyed having in our business. But again, those are things that we can control. They're not necessarily fun and they're not always enjoyable, but being able to say, okay, here's the things that as all of these things are fluctuating and happening, I'm responsible for reacting in the right ways or responding in the right ways, and really being adaptable and flexible. I really think when you look at the companies that have been in existence for a long time, it really comes down to their adaptability more than anything else, because everything is always changing. And the ones that just forge ahead and try to do it the way that they've always done it, or do it the way that it's always worked, and they're never willing to change, those are the ones that can end up having a really big problem.
So on that note of like having to cut costs in those contraction periods. So again, this idea that if we have to lay people off, then we did something wrong.
Yeah.
And again, not necessarily the case. Some of it is the business has to sustain so that it's like the pruning.
It is.
You talk a lot about nature and like a healthy tree versus a not healthy tree.
Yes.
If you're going to keep the tree healthy, you're going to have to prune it.
Yeah. And sometimes that's pruning stuff that's not healthy, right? But sometimes it's saying, like, we don't have enough resources to sustain this unless we make some cuts. Like, it will bleed the company dry or whatever the case may be. And that's really, really hard. And I do think a lot of people take it as like a failure. I actually think that the ultimate failure is not being willing to do the hard things and not being willing to be adaptable as you need to. I've got a client who last year they were really struggling and they were proactive about it. They were able to cut everybody's hours and kind of implement a plan nobody was overly thrilled about, but that's what they needed to do in order to sustain in that market. And this year it has been wildly different. In Q1, they've already hit half of their annual revenue goal in one quarter, which is crazy. And so we were talking and the business owner was very hesitant to hire somebody new. She said, well, that wasn't in the plan. And I was like, well, hang on. Our plan was based on a very conservative track for this year because last year was a huge struggle. And now actually the right move is to hire the people and to expand everybody's hours. So, right. So it's this constant, like, what's happening and what's the next right step. And she was really worried that if we hired that person, like, what if it shifts again? And in 6 months, we can't support it. And we just have to say, that's a tomorrow problem. Like, what's the thing that we need to do right now in service to the business? Obviously, that doesn't mean we can like change things like every 2 seconds. So we do need some stability with that. But we do have to respond to what's happening in the moment. And sometimes that means laying people off. Sometimes that means cutting hours. Sometimes it means hiring people and getting more support depending on what's happening.
So then that brought up the next question that I had for you. Number one, we talk a lot about healthy, sustainable growth. Like, you're a big fan of growth that is healthy and slower over growth for the sake of growth. And you've got a lot of instability.
Yeah.
So I pointed out, and I don't know if you thought of it before, but business owners, entrepreneurs are all about paying as little in taxes as they can.
They are.
Right? I mean, fine. Like, tax saving strategies. Like, let's be real. But my other thing for you is, like, if we know that we're going to have ups and downs in business that are unpredictable. In fact, I highly recommend, if you've never read Psychology of Money, it is an excellent book. I think every business owner should read it because it really talks about how very unrelated things you could, in hindsight, string them together to see how they create financial collapses and market shifts and changes in your customers' buying behavior.
Yeah.
So it's a great book. But if we just knew that these things were going to happen and we kept a little bit more cash on hand for those times, maybe we would feel more sufficient. But then we also get penalized more. So there's a lot of companies who will like, oh, we have an excess of money. We've got to spend. Let's buy this. Let's buy, like, we got to, like, let's hire people. Let's grow for the growth for the sake of growth is kind of a tax strategy because they're like, I'd rather grow the company and like do more with it here, pay myself more, different things, than have to give it to the government.
Yeah. It is interesting. And I had never thought about it in that correlation before. This idea that you've had a successful year, you get to Q4, you're like, what can I do to minimize my tax burden? And then people will do some big spend downs and things like that. And again, certainly if we can be strategic for tax purposes, it's not that I'm opposed, but again, I think we tend to latch onto one thing and say the most important thing is not paying too much in taxes. I think it's more important to take like more of like the circle approach, right? Like, what's the diagram that's like a circle where there's all the pieces that fit together like a pie? Like, there's not necessarily like that's a piece, that's a component. But to your point, do we need to spend on all of it? Is that really setting us up for success to weather some things that we may not see in the coming years? I would say most businesses that I work with, I would probably say, like, I've probably worked with about 45 companies. I would say I have 2 or 3 that actually have like really good cash reserves on hand. Most of the other ones might have a little bit, might have none, may have little to no cash cushion. And that could definitely be related to like tax strategies and spend downs and things. And so I think it's really about creating a shift to, again, a more holistic view of health of like, yes, sure, let's be strategic. But I also see people from the tax perspective, like buying things that they don't need simply to save the tax money. And that money may be better served over a long period of time in a savings account or being prepared for the future and prepared to weather those ups and downs. So,
yeah, I think some of that comes back to values, right? And it's like the taxes are the taxes. It's what you pay to live in the country. And if you don't like how your tax money is being allocated or spent, then, you take a more active role in politics and who you choose. So to that extent, right? But then the other piece is, I think you call it the peace tax.
Oh, yeah. I think there's a reality that I like to call, I can't quite take credit for that. I've heard that before and stole it. But this idea that, like, again, we prioritize all these other things. Like maybe we prioritize the tax strategy. I actually have a couple of clients who had profit, but not cash flow, right? So they had a taxable profit, but they did not have strong cash flow. But they were so upset by the fact that they were going to have a tax bill that they were trying to look for all of these ways. Like, what if we do a SEP IRA? What if we do this? What if we do this? And we kept coming back to the point, like, you don't actually have the cash to do that. It's very stressful now. It's putting so much pressure on you to figure this out. But they were so adverse to paying the taxes that they were almost willing to put the business into further financial harm, trying to figure out ways to spend more money that they didn't really have just in order to pay that tax bill. And so that doesn't take into account things like what I call the peace tax of like peace of mind. Like there is a tax. Maybe you have minimized your federal tax bill, but you have just created a whole lot of stress that's going to come at a cost to your peace. Or you've created a lot of stress on the cash flow of the business, and that's going to come at a cost in different ways. So again, I think that it's really important to look at all of those factors. And there's also a lot of people who feel peace in different ways, right? Like some people really feel more comfortable if they have a lot of cash on hand. Some people feel more comfortable if they don't have debt. So a lot of what I work with people on is like, there might be like mathematically a quote unquote better decision, right? But there's more to that piece of the puzzle. And if doing that mathematically quote unquote better decision comes at the cost of your personal peace and you're going to be anxious and worried and stressed, maybe we need to find a different solution that kind of meets in the middle.
So what is the question that you would ask someone to consider regarding how much cash they want to have or regarding how they'd want to run their business to plan for when times are tough? Because they are going to happen. This is the thing I'm trying to really land with listeners. It's not an upwards trajectory. It's not, and maybe it's like your business is doing everything that you want it to do and all you want to do is sustain it. And that's okay. But then all of a sudden your cost to deliver what you do goes up. Like what we were talking about with fuel costs are way up. And that is now making it so that you're less profitable. And versus having to cut, maybe it just doesn't matter that something changes that's beyond your control. So what is the question you would ask?
Well, I don't think it's just one question. I think that a lot of it will depend on the type of business and how complicated it is. So like a small single member service provider like you or I, or maybe we have like one or two people working for us and we've got a pretty low overhead number, that's going to be very different than somebody who has 50 people on board with them. So I think as a general rule of thumb, between like 2 and 6 months of overhead is a really helpful thing to have on hand. Most people probably don't have more than a month or two at the most. Again, many have none, right? But again, then it becomes varied per person because some people consider a line of credit to provide cushion, right? So some people may be less concerned with having physical cash in the bank because they're very comfortable utilizing a line of credit if something happens. Some people are not comfortable with debt. And that's really like a line of credit might be more of like a last case scenario or maybe used for more targeted purposes. So then it really does become very personalized with what does bring you peace. I will try to nudge people a little bit, right? Like there's some people that want to be very, very conservative There's some people who want to be very, very risky. And so I try to embrace where everybody's at and then kind of push a little bit whichever direction I feel like they need to go. But it is very individual with what people feel comfortable with. And I think a combination of their own comfort level with like risk factors in the marketplace and then their own size of business and operating and overhead and things are all a part of that picture.
I think that's the point where you go, it's nuanced.
It is nuanced. It always, yes, it's nuanced.
Right? So it's cash or sometimes access to capital, cash or access to cash for weathering the storms.
Some people may feel very comfortable investing in their business, or they have a family member who will. Some people have put every dime they have in the company and they're over it and they're done. And that is not an option, right? So, but yeah, trying to figure out what cash do you have? What cash could you have? What are you comfortable using? How much debt are you comfortable using? Again, with people who want to use debt, I always push a little bit. Like we talked about last time, that great conversation on debt is like, you could end up in the same place a year later now with a lot of debt that you have to pay off. So trying to encourage people to be careful with that. But yeah, those are all things that factor in to what we decide and try to target.
So if you take nothing else away from today's conversation, it's one, there are going to be ups and downs. Plan for it. I think like reality check, entrepreneurs love to be overly optimistic.
Mm-hmm. Very much.
But just like plan for it, plan for worst case scenario. I also think that you really have to look at your value system. So if you are someone who feels responsible for other people and making sure that they continue to have employment, then plan for that so that you don't have to be faced with that guilt and that discomfort of having to let people go if you prioritize people over profit, right?
Absolutely.
So whatever your value system is, your business needs to reflect that. If you value profit more, no judgment, like be prepared to have to let people go when things shift because they will.
Mm-hmm. I think that's actually a really good point. I think that there's a lot of people whose values support, like, I think they're bothered by having to lay people off. I think they're bothered by those things, but they don't operate with a sense of planning around that. Like there's a little bit of a disconnect there. And if they connected those pieces and then really ran their business with an awareness around that, that would provide a lot more peace when they're starting to encounter like the downtimes because they know, okay, I have XYZ saved up for exactly this moment in time. I don't have to cut this person or whatever the case is.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that.
Yes. So I think that gives people a lot to think about this month between our monthly money talks. If this really resonated for you, getting your values in alignment with how you run your business, creating a financial capacity plan, a way to actually have your business support what is important to you, what you want to drive in business this year, getting your mind on board with what you're up to and the actions that you need to take to create the finances that you have planned. If all of that makes sense, then I would really love to invite you to hop on a call with me for a capacity assessment and to see how we can support you. If you don't need it, which I venture to say everybody gets something out of this work.
Yes.
I'm not here to sell you something that you don't need, but I am here to make it easier to get what you want and to do it in a way that is sustainable, that reclaims your time so that you're not putting all of your time and energy and effort into something that isn't working the way that you think that it should, that you have the time for the people that you love and your business is not taking you away from being present with what's important to you, and that you create the life that is fulfilling for you. That is what we are about. So
absolutely.
I encourage you to stop waiting for someday because life is now and we only get this one life. And so it's like, how much more time are you going to spend thinking about making a change? versus actually making the change. So book that capacity call with me at consciousedge.com/capacity. And with all of that being said, sending you so much love. Thanks for listening to the Conscious Edge podcast. Make sure you subscribe and take a moment to be kind and share this episode with someone you care about. Leave a review to help us bring more compassionate leaders building businesses and creating wealth to the table. And for show notes, head over to consciousedge.com/podcast. This podcast and the linked materials are presented solely for general information, educational, and entertainment purposes and should not be taken as personal or medical advice or any kind of mental health treatment. Please consult a medical or mental health professional if you feel you need such services. Please be advised that all investing and entrepreneurial endeavors involve risk, and the use of the education and information on this podcast and linked materials is at the user's own risk.
This podcast is part of the Sound Advice FM network. Sound Advice FM, women's voices amplified.